So joining me on the show is former Wake County First Assistant District Attorney Howard Cummings. He's now in private practice, but he spent 30 plus years as a prosecutor. He was involved in many high profile cases, many of them that I covered. And Howard cared a lot about getting justice for the victims' families, but also for the community, for making the community safer. And his hallmark was a steady, calm demeanor inside and outside the courtroom. Howard, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Amanda. It's nice to be here.
So, today we're going to talk about a case involving Bradley Cooper. His wife was the victim, Nancy Cooper, and this was a domestic violence case. I think in most cases involving female victims, we are talking about intimate partners, correct? It's usually a husband or a boyfriend. Is that something that you experienced as a prosecutor?
Yes, usually. Um, and especially when the circumstances don't immediately point to if it occurs in the home, near the home, has something to do with the home, something to do with the relationship. Um, I can only remember one years ago, and um, and that was quite different.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most of the time you start close to the victim, right? You start in their close circle and you kind of move out if you can eliminate people in the close circle. But oftentimes you don't have to go outside the circle.
Well, and if you immediately start with the people that are closest to the deceased, and they present appropriately. They appear to have the appropriate interest and the appropriate desire to assist. Then you all obviously take that into account and try to corroborate what they're saying, and that they very well lead you to a different place. But so many times, the ones closest to them, the husband, the boyfriend, um, won't talk, won't say anything. You know, I certainly believe that everyone should have a lawyer when they're in the process of going through something that's sort of certainly as serious as a homicide. But you would think if they really love this person that they would bend over backwards to help.
To try to, yeah, to try to find out what's going on.
Sure.
So this case, and this was very poignant to me because it was my neighborhood. I didn't know the family at the time. I got to know the family, but I recognized them. And it was a suburb of Raleigh, Cary, North Carolina. Husband says wife went jogging, never came home. A friend calls 911 after she doesn't show up for something. He doesn't call 911. Do you remember hearing about, oh, we've got a missing woman case? And what were your impressions off the top?
I do remember that. Very good detective from Cary Police Department, George Daniels, came in to initially talk about it and talk to me about um, the demeanor of the husband. Um, and, we're, and as Nancy's father said, when he first found out that she was missing, he said, "This is not going to end well." And
Mhm.
that's certainly, that was certainly a first impression that you had, um,
And there were
because
so many people, right? I mean, this was a massive search looking for her.
massive search. It was organized. They um, they went through the woods. They went through all the places that she was known to jog. Went to businesses all through the neighborhood.
And I think it was just a couple days after she was reported missing that a dog walker found her in an undeveloped subdivision about 2 miles as the crow flies from her home. And she was wearing jogging clothes, but she was not sexually assaulted. And right away, I think you felt like, when I say you, your team felt like there was some culpability of the husband, that things just didn't add up.
Right. I mean, he just wasn't helping at all. And he was acting very strange around all his friends. Um, found her in her jogging clothes, but the jogging bra was turned up in the back. Now, obviously, I've never put one on, or I wouldn't admit it if I had. But in any event, it's not the way that a woman leaves it. They all turn up. You reach back around there, you straighten it out so that you can be comfortable. So
Yeah, and
it
especially since there was no sexual assault.
right.
There was no reason for her clothing to be disrupted. And I remember as a jogger, actually as a jogger, from that neighborhood, I mean, I remember thinking, yeah, nobody would ever have their jog bra discombobulated. Like it wouldn't be comfortable. And that was in the autopsy report, and it really jumped out at me as well. Um,
Sure.
talk about the fact that there was this custody battle very, very quickly because the grandparents, so the parents of the victim, Nancy, wanted to get emergency custody of these children. But as a result of that, there were affidavits being put into the public court record from many, many people in the neighborhood talking about the state of this marriage, the bad state of this marriage. How valuable is that to the criminal investigation?
It's valuable in that it um, lets you sort of feel like that you're headed in the right direction. That is, you're not off on a wild goose chase. That this that Brad Cooper was not who he wanted to appear to be. So it just it's nothing specific, but it gives you momentum.
And, obviously things came out, the marriage was not going well. There was a lot of financial and emotional control over who she saw, what she did, where she went, how she spent money. There was an affair. But I think what was really interesting is the fact that he sat for a deposition. And that really gave you some information because it was a 7 hour deposition and you could contradict some of the things he was saying.
It was so interesting that he sat for a deposition, under oath, sworn, have to answer questions as to the ultimate issue of what's in the best interest of the child, which is going to include everything about him. And yet he had never talked to the police. He never sat down and talked to them. And when he sat through his deposition, um, he was confronted with the information. Um, he was confronted with the location where the body was found. And he said, I don't know anything about that. What he didn't know at the time was that we would develop based on a search of his computer showing that he actually Googled that particular site um, at a time just about the time of the murder. But he said, I don't know what you're talking about.
And that
And
was like a 45-second Google search. I think it was maybe the night of or afternoon or day before, sometime, like you said, shortly before the murder.
but it takes so many keystrokes to get there. And you have to keep going and narrow it down and narrow it down. And he narrowed it down just to that place, which was in an undeveloped section of a subdivision at the end of an undeveloped cul-de-sac.
And you did what you would do in any case. You look at the alibi of the person. And in this case, he said that they were both up that morning with the kids, that they had run out of some things, and he was going to the grocery store. And he did appear on video surveillance at the local grocery store twice. He said that she had called him and asked him to go back and get something. But again, there were just so many holes in that. I mean, first of all, he was wearing something different in the
Right.
second videotape. I think it was different shoes, maybe even a different top. I don't remember. And then you were able to prove that that call could have been set up through his computer.
We did. He was apparently a pretty good internet engineer and with voice over internet protocol, which was just coming in at the time, but this has been many years ago, and actually had the equipment at his house that would allow him to manufacture a phone call so that it appeared that her phone was calling him at a certain time that morning, which he says to tell me to get something else from the grocery store. But in fact, that router, I believe it was shown to have been used to manufacture a phone call.
And you were able to determine through a lot of, I guess, boots on the ground investigation that that time between those calls, I think it was like 8 minutes, would have been just enough time to drive to that location, dump a body, and drive back and be on video again at the grocery store. I know this was a long trial. It was 8 weeks. There was just so much evidence and also a lot of drama. I mean, the defense attorneys did not get along with the judge in the case. There was a lot of sidebars. There was a lot of sending the jury out. Um, Going back to that Google search, I mean, is there one thing that you think made the case for you? Do you think it was that, or do you think it was just all of the evidence together?
I think that was really a really important part. One of the most important parts was a characterization of him when he's sitting on his front steps with neighbors around. And I can't remember whether this was while she was still missing or her body had just, I think her body had just been found, and there was no reaction by him, no real reaction at all. Um, but so many bits and pieces of circumstantial evidence that corroborated that.
And he
But
was he was convicted, and then the case was overturned, which obviously dealt with things, outside your control, things in the law, technicalities, however you want to put it. So then at that point, you've got a decision to make. Do we make a deal or do we try this voluminous case again? And you chose to make a deal. How did you come to that decision? I mean, I'm sure you consulted with the family.
I did this, I consulted with the family a lot, and her family are great people, and they understand what justice is and what justice demands. And in this case, they always felt like that that Brad and Nancy got in a fight, got in some disagreement, and he killed her. They felt like it was more of a thing of passion and not something that was really planned a long ways ahead of time. He went to great extent to hide it later on, but we had tried to resolve the case with something short of a life sentence before the trial ever started. Um, but we're not able to communicate that to the defendant because of at least one of his lawyers. So when it came back time uh, to try it again after the Court of Appeals sent it back, we talked to the family, we talked to everyone involved, and uh, everyone wanted closure, and they also wanted an admission. And he did admit in open court that he killed his wife.
And he got time served because he'd already been in prison for a certain amount of time or since he had been arrested. He was a Canadian citizen or is a Canadian citizen, so he was returned back to Canada. Do you think he's harmful to the public? Do you think he's a danger?
He was such an introvert before. Um, I don't think that he really wants to be out and about doing anything. Um, I certainly don't think that he's a danger. Of course, this is just my perspective on it, but he's not um, likely to have the privilege of engaging in some meaningful relationship again. So I don't think he would find himself in that position again. I have not
And
up with him, but
I know one of the big things about the family was that they wanted those girls to grow up with the victim's identical twin sister, Krista, and to have a normal life. And so they felt like as much time as they could get him in prison, that would give those girls time to grow up and make
right,
their own decisions.
right. But I think they're probably in their late teens or early 20s by now.
Yeah, so one should be, actually, they should both be, I think, uh,
Yeah.
at that age, right? Maybe early 20s, I think you're right. Um, you've covered so many cases, and this is, one that again just sticks out for so many reasons. Um, what's your takeaway from cases like this? I've heard investigators say, just divorce her. I mean, why do people continue to kill their spouses?
Well, sometimes it's the financial part of it. Um, they can't really, they can't really deal with losing whatever position they have. They don't want to lose. I'd like to think that they just didn't want to lose their kids. Um, but it's just a short way out. Both Brad Cooper and others like him are not, they might be smart intellectually, but they are not necessarily very mature, and they don't make the common day life decisions that a reasonable person would make. And I think that's part of the problem, is that they haven't lived life long enough to have a real respect for it. And they um, just take the easy way out.
It's a very good point. Howard, thank you so much for talking about this case and sharing your wisdom and insight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and you're welcome. And it's a pleasure always to be able to speak about these cases and the families that were involved, because that's what's important.
Thank you.